Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 214 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined in person by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Husker fans.
Yes, Dad and I are together for Thanksgiving. We've gotten together the past couple years, which has been nice. And today we'll be talking about Nebraska's game against Penn State, kind of the disappointing loss there, and talking about the very important final game we have against Iowa, is coming up as our final home game of the year. Also be talking about, the upcoming rivalry week for college football and the implications for the playoff, as we're recording this on Wednesday the 26th. So we do have the current playoff standings and all that fun stuff as well.
Sounds like an interesting conversation. Lots to dissect and anticipate this week.
Definitely. And we may sound a little bit different than usual. We don't have our usual microphone set up since we are, out on the road here recording in a hotel room. But we'll do our best to keep the quality up and the energy high.
There you go. I like that idea.
All right. And to kick things off, we're going to stick with our tradition, open up a cold beverage. I got myself non-alcoholic this time, just a bubbly burst juice.
Well, I was hoping to have you sample the drink I'm going to have here. I've got Four Peaks Brewing Company, makers of my favorite beer, which is Kilt Lifter, from the Four Peaks Brewing Company in Tempe, Arizona. And but this is an orange wheat ale that actually your mother loves and I like as well. It's a great, fruit wheat beer.
All right. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, yes. So to kick us off, we, of course, do have to talk about that Penn State game. You and I knew that game was going to be a challenge for the Huskers, but we were being optimistic on last podcast, thinking that, with the bye week and everything, that we would have a chance to win if we, played our cards right and made some good adjustments. So I predicted we would win 30-27. You predicted we would win 35-31. But the final score of that one ended up being 37-10. So quite a rough drumming, our worst of the season. Though interestingly, when you look at the stats for the game, they're actually not too bad, right? For example, we had 318 total yards to their 412. Both teams had no turnovers, equal time of possession, equal penalties. So a lot of things are not too bad, but of course the big stat is that Penn State had 231 rushing yards on 39 attempts. So they pounded the rock like we expected them to, and we weren't able to stop it.
That's right, and this is very fundamental. Here's the thing: yes, those stats look close or comparable, but they could have named the score. They could have named the number of yards. Really, in many respects, it was really a tale of two things. It's the same two things that we've been kind of harping on since before the season began, and it makes me want to rewind on a couple of previous games and readdress some things that we talked about prior to those games or whatever, but then skirted over them because the reality of it didn't come to pass. And the two that I'm going to pick out are the Michigan game and the USC game. In both of those games, we were very competitive. Nearly won two games that we lost, right? And in both of those games, I was projecting that there was a risk that we could get blown out. Now, in both of those games, in my opinion, those teams were extremely dominant relative to us, but because their coordinators, their play callers, chose to call the game the way they did, allowed us to hang around.
Right.
But this Penn State team did what a good, well-coached football team does, which is identify the weakness of the other team and then maximize their ability to take advantage of it. And that's what they did, which was to pound the rock, to just basically line up and smash us because we were inferior along the defensive line, and be aggressive along their defensive line against our offensive line because we had a young quarterback and a poor offensive line, which is the two things we've harped all year: line of scrimmage, line of scrimmage, line of scrimmage. And Penn State demonstrated what you do to Nebraska if you commit to running the football.
Right. Now, the fact that we only had 10 points in the game is a little bit misleading because, as we said, right, we had over 300 yards of offense. Our issue was red zone offense, right? We would get in the red zone and then we wouldn't be able to punch it in to get actual points. I was actually optimistic about the offensive line early on because you recall that our very first drive of the game, they opened up a beautiful hole that what's his name, Emmett, ran through for a big gain, that nearly scored us a touchdown right then and there.
Right.
And got us into the 4th and 1 at the goal line that unfortunately we didn't get. But that was leaving me optimistic, but they made some adjustments after that.
Well, and that has been the case a lot this year, where we had tremendous success early in the scripted first series or two of a game, only to be completely shut out. And I think I've heard a statistic, and I feel bad that I didn't have it written down here for us on our podcast. But the bottom line is, after the first 5 or 6 carries of the game, in which we averaged 8 or 10 yards a carry because of Emmett's big run there early in the game, and just in general, we were having success running the football. But from that point on, it's like the first 3 series or whatever, about the first quarter, and then by the time we got the ball another time, they completely shut us down. In the remainder of the game, we averaged like 2 yards a carry for the remainder of the game. Now that's unacceptable. Now, part of the reason for that is after that first quarter, when we demonstrated that we were either not willing to or were ineffective at throwing the ball deep, then they were able to just basically pin their ears back and come after us, which they did a lot, And then our guys, once they felt sorry for themselves, which we tend to do, they collapsed. And they, guys just, literally turnstiles. Right tackle just getting spun. Didn't even barely touch the guy. And it's like that kind of crap is unacceptable under any circumstance. And we've seen this now and then throughout the season.
Right. Well, and to give TJ some credit, although he didn't have a great game, he didn't have a terrible game either, right? As we mentioned, there were no turnovers, and he was 21 of 37 for 187 passing yards. So we did show that we could pass it, but they were short, to medium range passes, like you say. It's clear that the coaches don't trust TJ's long ball. They've seen stuff in practice that worries them about that. We did have a couple of passes that were like in that 20, 25 yard range. But it was clear that, we were relying on the running game more than anything.
I agree with you. But I don't know that it's not that they don't trust him to throw the deep ball. I think that they may very well have called some deep balls, but they couldn't execute. They couldn't get them off. Either the receivers were covered, right? Or, TJ didn't have the time to be able to get to them, right? So I'm not sure that they didn't call deep passes. All I know is he didn't throw very many, right? And he wasn't successful at any. I would say the biggest receptions that he obtained were intermediate passes, and that was as good as it got. But in my opinion, if you do that right, you can still keep pressure off by being successful with short and intermediate passes. But you also have to mix that in with some protection that allows the running game to be effective as well. And we were unable to do that. And again, a lot of my blame here goes to the coaching staff and to the game plan. And I want to go back to one specific moment that you mentioned just briefly, and that is the 4th down play in the first series. That is literally encapsulates my criticism of Matt Rule. I mean, I'm often very complimentary of Matt and how he manages the overall program and how effective he is at communicating the brand of Nebraska football and all the other things that are positive about what is going on in Lincoln. However, his game day management is so atrociously bad that it drives me crazy. And this was a great example of it. There's no way in hell that a Power 4 head coach who's getting paid more than $8 million a year should not have clearly understood and gone through all the scenarios for a fourth down and short, fourth down and medium, fourth down and long situation inside the red zone. All those scenarios, plus 10 others, should have been analyzed, determined before the game, and the game plan should have specific small groups of plays, 1 or 2 or 3 to choose from. That's it for every one of those situations. And the offensive coordinator should know exactly what the priorities were, which plays should be called, and what the circumstance is. So as soon as that fourth down situation came up in that game, which there was no reason for them not to know that was a possibility, because there was a third down before the fourth down. So therefore, they should know. They should absolutely know what that is. And what does he do? Has no idea what the hell's going on. You can see the confusion on the sidelines. He's not even sure what the play call is going to be. They don't get the play call in until there's like 11 or 10 seconds, 12 seconds left in the time clock before they even get the play into the quarterback. And now the quarterback is up at the line of scrimmage with 6 seconds to go, and they're rushing the snap of the football. I do not want them to call a timeout then. That's not my point. My point is they should have known. He should have known on second down of that series. He should have known that if we get to fourth down, this is what we're doing. This is the play we're calling. If we're 4th and 3, if we're 4th and 5, we're calling this play. If we're 4th and 8, we're calling this play. If we're 4th and 1, we're calling this play. Those things should have all been known, not only by him, but by the players. They should have already practiced it. Done.
Right. Well, not to mention, I believe it was 3rd and 2 on the previous play.
There you go.
It was very likely that if we didn't get it there, it was going to be 4th and 1.
Right.
So, yeah, I totally agree.
So that's my argument is the preparation, coaches.
Right. And not to mention that the play call that we finally did go with after taking that time was hand it to Emmett Johnson, go straight up the middle.
And let him pick it.
And he got stuffed at the line, and we didn't get anything. So no creativity there on the 4th and 1 play.
Well, not only no creativity, but when you snap the ball with 2 or 3 seconds before the end of the clock, the defense, they can see the time clock.
They're ready
it's right
jump
there.
it.
They know it's going to snap soon. And so their ability to anticipate and be already moving forward and have momentum forward, it's so much better. Right? So it is unacceptable. We should have been up at the line of scrimmage with our 4th down play call, everyone knowing what it was, with a good 15 to 18 seconds on the play clock. Let's go. No, we looked like a bunch of chaotic fools. And that is on Matt Rule and his staff. Now, I love Matt. I love all the things he's doing off the field. But that game management crap is unacceptable, and he knows it. I know he's a good enough coach. He knows that's on him. It's his mistake. He's got to get that right.
Right. But
why doesn't anybody ever ask that question?
Right. But it's year 3, and we're still seeing those same things pop up.
Right. Because not that we win the game, but the game plays out differently if we score on that series, and then in the second series we have good success, move the football, and have a chance to score some points there. We could easily have been up 14-7 on them. Or something like that early on, or maybe 14-14, and then at halftime, it's not already a blowout.
Right.
We're still in it.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say, because while, there are critiques we can have of the offense, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good your offense is if your defense is giving up points on every single drive, and that's basically what was happening against Penn State, because not only were they running the ball on us, but our pass defense, which has been, near the top of the country the whole year, there were a lot of blown coverages, where we were clearly playing zone and they just found the gap in our zone and had guys open. And
it all goes back to the first series, because after that 4th and 1,
right,
which we
they're
failed,
pinned deep.
98 yards. They were toying them. They were toying with us on offense the rest of the day. We only stopped them. We only forced them to punt once. That was in the third quarter. Otherwise, they pretty much scored or finished on a down.
There was the one time we forced them to kick a field goal when they drove it pretty far.
Right. I mean,
every other time was a touchdown.
Right. So my point is, after that 98-yard drive, forget the good secondary defense, because now our defense is scrambling. They're trying everything. They were throwing everything but the kitchen sink and all the different blitzes and packages and zone and man, and they were trying a little bit of everything. None of it was working because we were on our heels, because our guys didn't have any confidence, because they knew fundamentally our defensive line could not stop their offensive line. Period. Because you know what we didn't have as an option? Let's get our 6 300-pound guys. Let's get 4 of those guys and put all 4 of them on the line of scrimmage. And let's bring some linebackers in with some beef, and let's stop the run. Let's make them throw it to beat us. But we don't have 6 300-pound guys on our roster.
Right.
Okay? And that's a problem. Again, that's roster management. That's a coaching problem. That is our head coach not understanding the league that he plays in. And that's the thing that Matt needs to figure out very quickly.
Right. And to your point, a lot of it was maybe personnel over scheme, because we were trying a whole bunch of different things. But I've been defending, at least somewhat defending, like John Butler in some of our past podcasts, highlighting some of the good things that his system has accomplished for us this year.
Yep.
Him filling in for Tony White after last year, of course. And I thought that with the 2 weeks we had the bye week. Penn State didn't. I thought our coaches would be the ones throwing some new stuff at them and being more prepared. But like you say, we were on our heels from the very start of the game.
Exactly.
And so now I'm kind of in your camp, and I'm like, in my opinion, John Butler is coaching for his job in these last 2 games against Iowa and the bowl game. And if they both go as badly as we saw in that Penn State game, I think he should be fired.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I don't know that he's a bad coach, but I don't think he understands today's Big Ten. I get it. He was defensive coordinator at Penn State prior to his time in the NFL. But his time in the NFL has increased his complexity, his broader vision of what defense can and maybe should be because of what he experienced in the NFL. But that's not college football. You know what? We're getting beat by high school offenses. We're getting beat by the most basic, literally pitch play. Okay? Pull the right guard and the right tackle, do a lead blocks on the left hand, around the left-hand side, knock over everybody you can, create a hole, and let the guy run through it. It's that simple. It's mano-a-mano, nothing fancy about it. We're not doing any, RPOs or any of that shit. We're just going to run the football. We're going to pound the rock right at your face and stop us. That's what people are doing to us, and we can't stop it. There's no scheme in the world that can do that unless you have the horses to do it. And we do not have those horses. And that's on the coaches. They knew that 12 months ago.
Yep. Very true. Some minor notes of positivity to take away, though. There was only 1 sack in the game. So, we were able to give TJ some protection. Once again, he was not dropping back to go for deep balls.
Right.
That was not in the play call because, our offensive line was struggling. But, I think to give Holgerson some credit, right, he's adapted his play calling to adapt to the fact that TJ's the quarterback and our offensive line has been struggling throughout the year and we've had injuries there.
Right.
And also, I was listening to the Carricker Chronicles.
Right.
He did a video after the game and he was making a point of one area of our team that has seen significant improvement from this year compared to last year is the blocking by the wide receivers.
Yes.
And there were some examples of that in this game as well as other ones we've seen throughout the year. So, there's a lot of areas where this team is better than our team last year. But, like you say, there are just these gaping holes that we pointed out. You to your credit, you pointed out after the first game against Cincinnati, you were like sounding the alarm bells on the offensive and defensive lines.
Which was a concern I had going into the year, but there had been such glowing reports in the offseason about how, I have confidence in this group, I have confidence in that group, blah, blah, blah. And they believed that they would see what they needed to see for us to be successful. And then it didn't materialize.
Right. And last thing I'll mention, though, is all that stuff and those criticism is true, but also this Penn State team has been one that's been liable to make mistakes, throughout the year, like against Northwestern, right, who they barely lost to. They coughed up the ball and things like that. But there was this comment I found online from a Penn State fan who said, first game all year we've played like everyone expected to start the season. Yep. So they also executed at a level that they haven't basically all year. And now I've started to see, some momentum for this Terry Smith guy at Penn State to stay on as their coach.
I think that would be a huge mistake for them.
Yeah.
So more power to them. If they want to have Terry do it, that's great. I question whether a guy who basically has a history of being a high school coach, good high school coach, transitioned to a position coach at the collegiate level, remained a position coach for quite a while, right?
Right.
For probably 8 years or 10 years or something like that. Never got a coordinator's position, never left Penn State, okay, and now has gotten the interim title without ever being a coordinator, okay? And now you're going to make him your head coach, the guy who oversees an entire football program in the NIL roster management era of this. That's a huge leap. And maybe he's going to do great at it. But the history and the data is not there for him to do that. And to do that in the heels of firing a guy who averaged 9.5 wins a year is crazy.
That's true. That's true.
So, I mean, for all the love they have, here's what I think they might do. Is a much more likely scenario, in my opinion, would be that they hire another head coach, somebody that they target, and they bring that guy in who's been a head coach elsewhere, and they encourage him to interview Terry Smith and say he's a guy that we need to keep around. He's a Penn State guy, and what he did as interim coach, and the players love him. You need to keep him on staff and pay him well. And let's give him an attaboy for what he did to hold this ship together for Penn State University, right? And that makes a lot more sense to me in terms of how you would manage a situation like this. But that that's for them to deal with. But the bottom line for what you were saying before, the reason they look so good is because their offensive and defensive game plans were so damn simple. Again, high school level. Because they had the physical dominance at the line of scrimmage, both sides of the ball, that allowed them to keep things really straightforward and simple. They didn't have to do anything magical. They literally lined up, ran the football with the most basic of plays. There's nothing fancy about what they did to us. And our coaches, our coordinator, admitted they weren't doing stuff we didn't expect. It's not like we were shocked and surprised and were adjusting on the fly to what they were doing. We simply couldn't stop them. We ran into a juggernaut. We ran into, this incredibly good team. Well, yeah, you ran into a team.
Very talented team.
Very talented team. It's a reason they were preseason ranked top 5, consensus top 5 team, right?
Yep.
And as they have talent. But we allowed them to do that to us because we did not have the right roster construction, and we do not understand the league that we play in. And that's where John Butler, his greatest weakness is. He seems to have a blind spot and not understand that he's coaching in the Big Ten. And you have to stop the run. And if he really understood that, instead of being so preoccupied with his secondary and defending the pass, I believe he would have been far more anxious and aggressive at seizing. Even if he had to get defensive tackles who were second or third on their choice, I would have been happier if we had swung and missed, but then still went out and got some big bodies So we would have had big bodies on the team to actually throw out there in a situation. We didn't even try to go get those guys.
Right.
Once we whiffed on a couple of big-time defensive tackles that were part of the portal last year, and we tried to get them, and we didn't get them because we got outbid. Okay?
Right.
Well, either you throw more money at them because you understand how important they are to our specific situation, our specific team. You know what? Desperate teams. This is a Matt Rule quote, right?
Right.
Desperate teams set the market. Apparently, he didn't understand we were a desperate team for defensive linemen and offensive tackles. And to me, that's absurd because here I am, just average Joe, football fan, and it's obvious to me. It was obvious to me last spring. It was obvious to me at the end of last season what we needed, and he didn't get it.
Right.
Period.
All right. So, of course, we have the rivalry game for us against Iowa coming up here to end the year. It is a home game for Nebraska. The current spread is -6 to Iowa, so they are the favorites. Once again, which is not surprising given the success they've had this season. Now, despite that success, they had a close call this past weekend against Michigan State.
Right.
Iowa won right at the end of the game, 20-17.
Yeah.
But actually, Michigan State was up 17-10 in the fourth quarter and kind of collapsed late. Let Iowa score, and then Michigan State got the ball back with, if they'd gotten a few first downs, they would have killed the clock, ended the game, but they couldn't do it. Right. Had a bad punt, and then Iowa with their great kicker, of course, gets down there and kicks a game-winning field goal. Though I will say with a incredible catch by one of their wide receivers to get them in that position.
That always happens, though. Again, that is classic Iowa.
Yep, it was.
There's something to be said about Iowa's coaches that is again, this is something that Osborne did a lot, which was that you always hold back a few things that you believe will work, okay? And then even during a game, you can see that you're setting it up and you're setting it up. It's there, but you don't pull the trigger in the second quarter. You absolutely hold on to that little golden nugget until the fourth quarter. And I'm convinced, having watched Iowa for many years, that they absolutely are as patient and disciplined as the Osborne era was at Nebraska, where they hold that stuff back so that they're ready to spring those plays and those sets of circumstances, those formations, onto a team in the fourth quarter. Because they can be completely ineffectual for 3 quarters and then magically score 10 points or 14 points in the fourth quarter to win a close game. And they do it so consistently that it is absolutely part of their DNA.
Right. Well, yeah, Kirk Ferentz is 70 years old, so he's not quite Tom's generation, but just a little bit after Tom.
Yeah, right.
So he certainly has that mindset. It is worth noting, though, with Iowa in this game, they were actually down in the turnover margin, which they aren't usually. They were down 2-1 on that regard. Also, in terms of third downs, they were 1 of 10. So their offense struggled. They actually scored one of their touchdowns on a punt return.
Right.
So they struggled significantly against Michigan State's defense. Now, it should be noted that Penn State also struggled against Michigan State's defense for 3 quarters in their game that they played against Michigan State the week before they played us. So my takeaway from that is Michigan State's better at stopping the run than we are.
Oh, well, yeah, shocker. Yes.
So we can't necessarily count on that same stat happening for Nebraska.
I guarantee you that won't be the case. Iowa's offensive team is licking their chops watching that Penn State film.
Yeah.
Absolutely licking their chops because they know 2 things. They have a superior condition along the line of scrimmage, no doubt about it. And as a result, they can be as patient with their running game, and they can be as selective about how they dispense the football to minimize the risk of making a mistake like a interception, okay? This is the thing. Look back. When was the last time we had interceptions or fumbles that we recovered with any regularity? You know what I mean? Where we were dominant on the turnover ratio this year after the fourth or
first few
fifth games of the year. And the answer is it hasn't happened very much. And it's because teams realized all we have to do is not make mistakes. If we don't give free opportunities for Nebraska to score, then they're not going to be able to create them on their own. And their offense is going to be able to only be moderately effective against us. And then our defense or our offense is going to be able to move the football as long as we give ourselves the time to do so. And that's what people do. Grind, grind, grind. Now, the ones where we were able to stay close were offensive coordinators who were so hell-bent on their own game plan or their own philosophy that they weren't willing to do that. Right. And I'm talking about Lincoln Riley and Michigan's Sharon Moore's offensive coordinator, whose name I don't even know. Those two games against very good teams, but those very good teams made us look better than we were because of their bad choices on offense.
Right. And in terms of other Nebraska football-related news, there have been a few updates we wanted to mention. One was the blackout, which we talked about on a previous podcast, which was a big success.
Great success.
Yes, from that USC game. It was announced officially by the athletic director that will become an annual tradition. So we will get one blackout game every year, which we both agreed sounded like a good idea when we talked about it before on the podcast.
Right, absolutely.
Also, we got another commit for our 2027 class to boost that further than it already was. He's a 2027 four-star running back named Amir Brown.
Yes.
So that's a good fit, a replacement for Emmett Johnson in the future, perhaps.
Yes. Well, and again, we're doing a good job of getting some recruits, but what we need is what?
Transfer portal linemen.
Offensive and defensive linemen.
Yep.
That has to be absolute 1A and 1 and 1B and 1C. All the priorities are line of scrimmage, because we play in the Big Ten, and somebody needs to hit Matt Rule and his staff upside the head until they understand that is the single and only important thing for them to do.
And we can, another thing that Carricker brought up in his video is how a lot of our linemen are young, right? And they have, have the off season, they can bulk up, they can, do the weight training and all that stuff. So hopefully we will see improvement, from those players in the next year.
Sure.
They'll, by the time they're seniors, if they stick with the program and they don't get a major injury, they'll be very experienced. But we need some big bodies to help supplement that. We can't rely on that alone.
No, we can't rely on that, because you know what that is? That's called potential. And what is the Kirk Cignetti effect? Performance rather than potential. I need to see performance. And you know what? And you know what the other problem is? When we get in this cycle of playing kids before they're ready because they're still too small, like Van Poppel and some of our other young defensive linemen, guess what happens to them?
They get hurt.
And then what can't they do? Develop. Why? Because they can't lift weights. Because they can't do the developmental stuff that they need to do to get the reps that they need to get better, so that they are ready the next year for Big Ten football. So it becomes a perpetual cycle of never having what you need. The only way to do that is to have enough big boys and then have the young guys developing behind them, so that you have or you have to recruit the extremely rare athlete who is ready immediately. And that is that top 100, top 150 athletes. Okay?
Right.
And we don't do that nearly often enough.
Right. Well, that's hard. And the other big piece of news was that a decommit this time, Dayton Raiola, who was a 3-star quarterback for the 2026 class, decommitted from Nebraska, which of course got some people talking because of his last name, and the obvious connections the Raiola family has with Nebraska. It obviously is a bit of a disappointment, but we have obviously TJ Lateef behind Dylan that we're now seeing him perform this year. We have our third string guy that I forget his name. And in the 2027 class, we have Trey Taylor, who's a big name guy. So Dayton was always kind of in a bit of a, awkward sandwich, I would say, in our quarterback room, if you're looking at,
the future,
who we currently have and who we have behind him. So I'm not too surprised by the decommit, I would say.
Well, I am very surprised by the decommit, not because of the quarterback room scenario that you talk about, but because of the timing.
Right.
He certainly didn't give himself the best
Window
of opportunity to go find an alternative team to Nebraska, because in 2 weeks, people are going to be signing letters of intent, and so and quarterback is a position that almost every team in the country tries to fill early in the recruiting cycles, so that they have that locked in, and then that's an important cycle. Well, like the Trey Taylor example, Trey has been outstanding at peer recruiting ever since the day that he committed to Nebraska.
Right.
Okay? And so that's what you hope and look for with your quarterback commit, right? So I'm not saying that Dayton wouldn't have been a good fit here or wouldn't have done well at Nebraska. He might very well have done very well at Nebraska. But for whatever reason, he decided that was no longer a good option for him. And his family obviously was involved in that decision, which is a little scary and which is creating all the instability in the whole Nebraska fan base now because of his brother and his last name.
Right. Yes. So obviously, we'll keep an eye on that, see if anything plays out there.
Everything's just speculation at this point. You just got to wait and let it play out the way it's going to play out.
Exactly. And then we want to make a quick mention for the girls volleyball team. They had 2 important games against Iowa and Indiana here recently. Won both of them 3-0, but with some struggles. Like I know in that Indiana game, they were down in some of those sets and had to make a comeback, and you were stressing for sure.
Yeah. Well, the thing that has kind of happened over the last, 4 games of the season is Nebraska has become a little bit less consistent in their performance, and I think it's primarily starts and ends with their passing and their serving. I think that 2 things have happened. One, their passing performance has deteriorated, and specifically Harper Murray, who's one of our best players, teams have begun to target her in their serve attack. So when they serve, they're going after Harper. Not even as much to break her down, although that has happened now with greater regularity than we've seen before. But it also puts that extra burden on her, has negatively impacted her attack percentage. So by making her work so hard on defense, her offense has suffered. And so you're getting 2 bangs for the buck, so to speak,
right,
if you're an opponent of Nebraska. And that scares me a little bit because of what the implications are to that as we approach the end of the season and the NCAA tournament. The good news is that we did already win the Big Ten championship outright because we've done such a good job of being consistent with our performance that we've already won the Big Ten.
Right.
We still have 2 more games left here coming up this weekend. One of them against Penn State, which will be a real challenge for us. But I'm optimistic that we can find a way to bring a couple of W's in. But I'm really hopeful that Danny Busboom-Kelly, our new coach, recognizes the failure of the team to improve in this area of passing and I would also say serving, that we've also changed our serving approach in a way that I think has been detrimental to our ability to dominate.
Yeah. Now, the final 2 games we have are against Ohio State and who's the other one? Penn State. That's right. Which were both of whom were expected to beat. We beat Penn State earlier this year. Certainly not pushover teams, though. But what I want to ask you about was the tournament, because after this weekend, I assume they'll announce, what the bracket is for the tournament.
Yep.
We're likely to be a number 1 seed.
Yes.
So what do you think, in terms of looking at the non-Big Ten teams, the ones we might get matched up against, further on in the bracket, who, like in the past, you've been like, I want to avoid Texas, I want to avoid Wisconsin. Who's the team we want to avoid this year?
Well, okay, so first of all, the ones who are going to be the other 3 number 1 seeds are the ones that you're not going to see until the Final Four, assuming you get there and they get there, right?
Right.
So those other 3 teams are likely to be Kentucky, Texas, and probably Pitt or maybe Arizona State, depending on what happens this weekend in these final matches of the season, okay, before the tournament starts. But those are the teams that are going to end up with the top four. Teams I would want to avoid would be Wisconsin, because they now are healthy for really the first time in a long time during the course of the season, and I think they're playing their best volleyball right now. And we've already played them and beaten them. I would like them to end up somewhere else and let them knock off one of those teams I just mentioned to get to a Final Four, and then we'll face them. And I'm okay with that. We'll face them then. That's fine. But I don't want to face them before then, right?
Right.
Similarly, there's a couple of other teams like the University of Miami, which has a player who is just exceptional. And I'm not going to pronounce her name because it's long. Flo is kind of her nickname, and she's phenomenal. And she has literally single-handedly won a bunch of matches for them, where
Wow.
she's had 45 kills in
Wow.
one match, right? So you want to avoid that kind of a player that could just come in and because they're so effective that you can't stop them, and then they beat you, but then they turn around and have a bad game the next match and lose, right? And that inconsistency is the problem because they rely so exclusively on that one talent.
Right.
But those are the teams you don't want. And so there's a few others like that. So it'd be Creighton, Wisconsin, Miami. Those are the teams that kind of I'd rather not. Maybe even Texas A&M would be another one. I don't want to see those teams. But I'm sure we'll see at least one of those in our bracket. That's just the way it's going to play out. And the interesting thing is being the first seed versus being the fourth seed really is irrelevant as long as you're one of those top four. In fact, most of the pre-bracketology type of people that I've seen in the volleyball world, frankly, many of them that I've seen, even though we've been the number one seed in all these projections of brackets, we've had the worst bracket. So being the first seed versus being the second, third, or fourth seed is irrelevant, in my opinion. It becomes a random thing, and it's because of how they organize the bracket. They only seed the top 32.
Right.
The other 32 are organized based on travel and things of that nature, proximity, and balancing out all the different places, right, where the games are going to be held to minimize cost. So you can be the number one seed and get screwed because somebody who's one of those scary, threatening teams, like, for example, Creighton, is in our backyard. Wisconsin's not very far from us. So it becomes a question of,
Right.
do we ending up with somebody like that because it's convenient?
Right.
Not because it's fair or that because we should get the easiest path, but we won't. I mean, that's not guaranteed at all.
Right. And we know of Nebraska's luck on,
Exactly.
matchups. We've talked about that before. All right, and then switching to the national side of things for college football, there were some updates in the coaching carousel world that we wanted to mention. One was that Mike Norvell, who is the current coach at Florida State and has been in some serious hot water all season, has officially announced that they are sticking with him at least until 2026. The reports I've seen are because basically they can't afford to fire him because of
Right.
The amount that his contract still has and the amount they'd have to pay a big coach to come in. Not to mention the competition. They don't be out there in that bidding war for Lane Kiffin for sure if their pockets are not deep. So yeah, Mike's sticking around. Another one that did get announced was that Eric Morris, who was the North Texas coach, is filling in for the head coaching position at Oklahoma State. So that's quite a jump up for him in his career. We'll have to see how he does in that role.
Yeah, I've not followed North Texas at all to really understand it, but I'm gonna just assume that he's done well there. But I don't know his background. And Oklahoma State's a pretty darn good spot to land, frankly.
Yeah. Also, there are rumors, and it sounds like these are not confirmed. The coach is going to make a decision after this upcoming weekend, but the South Florida coach Alex Golesh is rumored to be the choice for Arkansas because they fired their coach earlier this year. But yeah, apparently I saw he put out a statement saying, I'm going to talk with my family. I'll just announce what I'm doing after this upcoming game. So we'll see what happens there. The UConn coach, Jim Mora, was hired at Colorado State. So he's going there. And California University fired Justin Wilcox, fired their head coach. So yeah, we're going to see the carousel keep spinning. We haven't... Florida State, some of the other big name universities that had some hot water seem like they're not going to fall.
Right. Wisconsin, would be another one that's decided to stay with their current coach. And I actually think given what had already transpired in terms of jobs of open and available and recognizing who was available in terms of the coaches pool, if you will, it makes sense to not do that.
Yeah, I would agree. Then talking about the actual games from last week of college football, week 13, we did predict a couple of them. We both predicted that Oregon would win against USC. I predicted they would win 31-24. You predicted it would be a wider score, 42-21. But the final score there ended up being 42-27. So more on the higher scoring side, like you were thinking. But watching the highlights for that game, it was a back and forth affair. USC was down 35-27 with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So they only down by one touchdown at that point. Then Oregon scored and kind of put it away. But it was a good back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Another one we predicted was Missouri versus Oklahoma. Right. I went ahead and predicted that Missouri would pull out the upset and win 35-28. And you went Oklahoma's way 28-24, ended up being even lower scoring than that with a riveting score of 17-6.
Oklahoma.
Yes, going Oklahoma's way.
Yes.
Frankly, it was kind of a continuation of their previous game where Oklahoma's offense didn't play great, but their defense got it through for them. Missouri had 2 interceptions, a blocked field goal, and a field goal basically at their own goal line. So if Missouri, capitalized on those opportunities that they had, didn't make those mistakes, they probably win the game.
Well, yeah, or Oklahoma, does some different things too, right, in that situation.
Sure.
But the bottom line is it was a competitive game.
Yes, it was. And one of the scores that got some headlines for obvious reasons is Notre Dame playing against Syracuse. Mm-hmm. They absolutely destroyed them 70-7. And Syracuse's 7 came at the very end of the game, basically. It was looking like it was going to be a shutout, basically, up until the end. Notre Dame went up 21-0 before their offense even touched the ball because they got a pick six, a kickoff return for a touchdown, and another pick six.
Right. See, and a game like that, and with those kinds of when the score gets out of hand like that, but then the other team keeps making blunders, right, or playing into things like pick sixes. That's not on Notre Dame, right? At some point, Syracuse gets the same number of scholarships that Notre Dame does, and you at least have to have the ability to be competitive. If you're not, it's not on anybody's fault but your own. A little bit like Nebraska, Penn State. We have no one to blame but ourselves. There's nothing about that because Penn State, you'll recall, did a fake punt. Okay, and they didn't need to do that. They were going to win the game anyway. I mean, and they took risk to do that.
Yeah, they were on their own side of the field.
On their own side of the field, and they did that. Why? Because that's the level of confidence they had that their defense was going to be able to moderate what Nebraska could do, and they were being aggressive. So,
yeah, I would agree. And then there were some kind of surprising scores going with the Florida State situation, like I just talked about. They lost against NC State 21-11, and Georgia Tech lost again against Pitt 42-28. So there are two ACC teams that have fallen on hard times here recently.
Right. The ACC is a mess.
It is. Definitely is. Another one that was kind of crazy was LSU against Western Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
They lost, or they won that game, but it was only 13-10. Admittedly, Western Kentucky only had 3 points. I think they scored 7 late in the game to get it to 10. So it's not like Western Kentucky was there the whole time. But the fact that LSU, even with them having fired Brian Kelly and all that, couldn't put that one away against Western Kentucky is concerning for sure.
Absolutely. But it asks, well, it's a little bit, again, like Penn State. After you fire a coach, a lot of times the players don't know what to do. They're without a rudder.
Yep, that's true. And probably the single craziest game, well, there's 2 crazy games I want to mention. One was actually in the Big Ten, Northwestern versus Minnesota. Northwestern won that one 38-35. Northwestern was actually -1 on the turnover margin, but they still won the game, and they put up 525 yards of offense. The Northwestern team we beat. So
yeah, and a Minnesota team that kicked our butt.
Yeah, so surprising to me that Northwestern managed to pull that one out.
Right. Well, but basically Minnesota's not very good. The only time they've looked good is against us. They really aren't very good.
Yeah. And the other crazy one was in the Big 12, which was Utah versus Kansas State. I watched the highlights for that game, and it was a crazy back and forth score fest. Utah ended up pulling it out 51-47. But actually, Kansas State was up 31-21 at halftime, so they had a 10-point lead, believe it or not. And the stats, when you look at how that game ended up, are just insane. They had a total of over 1,000 yards of offense combined between the two teams.
Yeah.
And Kansas State's running back, Jackson, had 24 carries for 293 yards, leading to them having 472 yards of rushing.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was just, Kansas State would get off these breakaway runs where one guy misses a tackle and then he's just gone off to the races.
Wow.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. That Utah team is quite possibly our opponent in the Las Vegas Bowl, assuming we lose to Iowa.
That would be, after watching that game, that would definitely be tough on our defense. Admittedly, they are they're not as much about running, although they did run it for 292 yards in this game.
Yeah, they are.
but they're definitely more passing it than Kansas State was.
Well,
Let's put it that way. But yeah, what was actually really wild about that game was Kansas State was up 47-35 with 7 minutes left in the game, and they went for 2, and it got intercepted and returned by Utah. So
they got 2.
So they got 2. And the final score of the game, was 51-47. So if they would have gotten that 2-point conversion and then Utah would have gotten the ball back and scored and gotten 7 points the way they did, it would have been tied 49-49, right? So that 2-point conversion that going the other way was the difference between this being an overtime game and it being an outright win for Utah, because then Kansas State got the ball back, had a minute left on the clock, could have done something, but then they threw their only interception of the game to lose it. So it was a tough one for that quarterback who played really well, not so much throwing it, but in terms of running it and managing the game, played quite well. Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, that was a fun one to watch. That'll be on people's lists of best games of the year, I think. But before we get into our predictions, including our prediction for the Nebraska-Iowa game, actually, let's get into those predictions, and then we'll talk about the playoff. We'll talk about the playoff to kind of end the podcast, because there are obviously implications from that. But in terms of Nebraska-Iowa, like I mentioned, we are 6-point underdogs according to Vegas. And I was being optimistic last week, saying that we could beat Penn State, because I thought Penn State was going to be easier than Iowa, because Iowa also runs the ball a lot, has a very good defense, has won a lot of games this year, more so than Penn State, has more momentum. Now, the way that they struggled against Michigan State does give me some hope. It's looking like it's going to be a cold game, so probably a lot of running it from both teams in that one. It is a home game for us. It's senior day, so some of those things should go in our favor. We don't have that tough environment of the Penn State, stadium that we did last week. But I got to be more realistic here, and based off of the disappointing performance at Penn State, I think we are going to lose. I think it won't be as bad as the Penn State game, but I think we will lose. So let's say it's going to be something like 21 Nebraska to 30 Iowa, let's say.
Wow. Okay. I think it's going to be lower scoring than that. Now, I've been browbeating the hell out of Nebraska this whole podcast.
Yes.
So I can't say that I'm optimistic, but I want it so bad that my prediction is going to be for a Nebraska victory. But it's going to be 23-21 Nebraska.
All right, we're going to squeak it out.
We're going to squeak it out. We're going to give them a little of their own medicine. And it's going to be because it's senior day, because they're not great. Okay?
Right.
They're good and they're sound. That's always true for Iowa. Any Kirk Ferentz team is going to be that. But they're not going to be, absolutely out athlete us across the board. And I'm hopeful that the pride will emerge from Nebraska's defense and offensive line, and that we have better skill talent than they do. I think our wide receivers are better than their wide receivers. I think our quarterback, even though he's young and inexperienced, is capable of doing more positive things with both his legs and his arm than their quarterback can.
Right.
Okay. So if we can just gather the oomph, the momentum, the whatever fortitude to play harder along the offensive and defensive line purely because of pride, then we, with our home crowd, carry it across the goal line and win and get to 8 wins. That's what I want. That's why I'm going to say it. Now, I wish you guys could see what's going on, but that's the way it is. It's radio.
Yes.
It's audio.
Yes. I like this more positive dad countering my pessimism.
No. See, you're usually the optimist. Since you went the realistic route, I feel like I need to do this. But and the thing is, we are. I mean, I don't believe our roster is inferior to Iowa's.
Right.
I believe our coaching is.
Right.
But you know what? I think part of it is our coaches just not acknowledging the weaknesses and addressing them in a way that gives us a decent chance of competing. I'm hopeful that they're going to do that.
And I'll take solace in the fact that we were underdogs against Iowa last year, and we're in a position to win that game.
Should have won it.
Very much should have. We were together for that one too, and watched it slip away from our fingers. But our special teams are much better this year. Mike Eckler is getting nominated for the special teams, Coach Award for this year. Because them did such a good job there. So in that aspect, obviously Iowa's very good there too. But we're at least competitive with them there. Like you say, it's going to come down to the running game, as per usual.
Yes.
And then obviously there are a lot of good games this upcoming weekend with all the rivalries. Georgia Tech, Oregon Washington, LSU Oklahoma, Vanderbilt Tennessee. But we're going to focus on two of the big ones, which is Texas versus Texas A&M. Big one in terms of implications for the playoff. That one is a home game for Texas. Obviously, they're coming in as the underdog. A&M is one of the leaders of the SEC right now, so they kind of have the momentum on their side. But do you think with the Texas home crowd and maybe a bit of home cooking from the refs, do you think Texas could pull out the upset?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. This is a Texas A&M. Anything that involves the University of Texas, cheating is always on the table because they find a way to have wonderful things go their way magically in every situation like that, particularly against their rivals. And so I'm going to predict that Texas is going to win that football game, not because they're the better team, but because they have more money to pay off the refs. And there's going to be a call or two in that game that are going to be hugely significant and controversial, but it'll lead to a Texas victory, let's say 28-24.
Okay, so it will be close, but it's going to go Texas' way because of that cooking.
Because they're cheaters.
All right. Well, I'm going to go the opposite way.
You're smart.
I think that Texas has narrowly won a lot of their games this year. Obviously, they do have a lot of talent, but A&M has shown themselves to be very good throughout the year. They also have had some close calls, to be fair. But I think they're going to pull this one out. I think it will be high scoring, but let's say A&M wins something like 38-31 over Texas.
That's great. I think Texas A&M's the better team too. I just think that when it comes down to it in a game like this, the cheating will impact the final result.
Okay. And then, of course, we have the game, as it's known in our neck of the woods, where we grew up, or where I grew up, I should say, in Michigan, which is, of course, Ohio State-Michigan. It is a home game for Michigan. Obviously, Ohio State's coming in as the number one team in the country, while Michigan's more like 17th in that kind of range. But according to the weather report, it's going to be cold and potentially windy, so not great conditions for an Ohio State team that might want to throw the ball more. Might favor Michigan's ability to run it. And, of course, there's the fact that Michigan has beaten Ohio State 4 years in a row now, and might just have the psychological edge against these Ohio State players. I saw it was mentioned no player on Ohio State's team has beaten Michigan. All of them have lost,
right?
Even the seniors. So this is one where, I just looked it up. The Vegas odds are Ohio State favored by 10 points. All the stats and everything would say that Ohio State's the favorite, but Michigan's proven it time and time again that they can make it happen, and have a good game plan for this all-important game. So what do you think?
Oh, you're going to make me choose first. Okay, this is another one of those where Ohio State's the better team, clearly.
Yeah.
But history says Michigan is going to play well in this game and
find a way.
Overperform to the relative perceived talent, right? But I'm not a huge believer yet in Michigan's offensive, their quarterback. I think Michigan has a good running game. They have a very good offensive line, and they have a good defense, not a great defense. And I think you're going to see an incredibly motivated Ohio State team. Recall that last year was the Michigan sticking the flag in the ground of the Ohio State logo at midfield that had them losing their crap, right? So I believe that Ohio State's going to come in locked and loaded and ready to kick some tail. And they're going to want to execute. So I think Ohio State's going to win this because of that more than anything else. They're going to be the motivated team and really put on a show. But I will acknowledge the recent history with Michigan doing really well, and so it's going to be close.
Okay. Well,
I don't know. What's the score got to be?
Well, I was looking at the weather. The current forecast is for it to be 30 degrees and 80% chance of snow.
Really?
Yeah. Though the snow,
I didn't know that.
Snow might not start until the game has already started.
Okay.
So that might be a factor too. But I brought up before how Ryan Day, because they were on top of the world last year, it seemed like he wanted to make a statement, and he came in with kind of more of a run-focused game against Michigan, and that was clearly a mistake, and Michigan was prepared for it, and Ohio State was not able to get all their pieces going last year that they were previously. And I think he's learned from that mistake, and he's not going to do that this time. He's going to come in with doing what they've been doing all year to teams. But weather might give Michigan State, a helping hand there. Or Michigan, right? Not Michigan State. Might give Michigan a helping hand there. Obviously, it's a home game for Michigan. That crowd's going to be out there and eager, because even though Michigan hasn't had their best season this year, if they can beat Ohio State again, those fans of Michigan will be overjoyed.
They'd be 10-2. If
True.
they beat, this is a chance for Michigan to be 10-2
and be in the playoff.
And be in the playoff, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think there's no doubt. If they win this game, Michigan will be one of those top 12 teams.
So they got a lot to play for.
That's true. Yeah, they do.
I think, against Iowa, I went with the cold reality, and said that Iowa would win. For this one, I'm going to go with my heart and say that Michigan just has that special sauce, and it might be a snowy, ugly, kind of low-scoring game, but that Michigan manages to pull it out. Mm-hmm. So let's say Michigan wins something like, let's say 24-21 over Ohio State.
Okay, I'm going to say 27-21 Ohio State wins.
27-21.
And you're saying Ohio State wins?
No, I'm saying Michigan wins.
You're saying Michigan wins. Okay.
All right.
So we're on opposite sides of that. That's good. And I'm going to say that just because I believe Ohio State's the better team, but I would not be surprised at all if Michigan wins this football.
I was going to ask, have you talked to Brian about this one at all?
I have, yes. And his general consensus is he thinks that Ohio State's going to win, but he always says that before every game. If they were playing Timbuktu U, he would think that Timbuktu U was going to beat Michigan.
Right.
And then afterwards he'd say, I knew all along we were going to kill him. Because he's that kind of a front runner weasel. But I hope he listens to this podcast. Bottom line is he understands that Ohio State's the better team, but he also appreciates that Michigan's kind of in their head and has their number. And so he feels really good about it because they got nothing to lose. If they lose, they were supposed to lose. And I guess in hindsight, after blowing my top a little bit earlier in the podcast about Nebraska's Penn State thing, my anger is with the coaching staff, and really, it's a nothing to lose situation. If we had beaten Penn State, it would have been a huge upset, right? We were 10-point underdogs. So if we had lost that, or if we had won that game, that would have been a huge upset. The fact that we lost it's just one loss. Now, we looked horrible doing it because they had, I think, the game plan that everyone should have against us. What I'm hoping, for example, against Iowa is that Iowa isn't that smart and they don't put that game plan in place and they try to throw the football and do the things that they normally try to do, like they did at Michigan State. I mean, when they played Michigan State, they let Michigan State hang in there. And Michigan State actually had the lead by 10 points. It was 17-7 in the third quarter. Michigan State winning. So I mean, Iowa just really was not effective at scoring points for 3 quarters of that game. And so there's a chance that we can win that football game because if Iowa's stubborn. But if they run a game plan that's like Penn State's, then we're going to lose, and it might not even be close.
Right. Looking right here, Iowa had 147 passing yards and 154 rushing yards. Yeah. Now, they did run it 39 times versus 22 passing it, so they were still 2/3 in favor of their running game.
Right.
But yeah, to your point, it wasn't working as effectively for them, and they had the 2 turnovers.
Right, exactly.
Which are huge for them.
That is huge because Iowa doesn't have much margin for error. Yes. And that's why they have to be error-free.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that maybe, since we're playing them in Lincoln, maybe we get a couple of errors from them, get some other uncharacteristic things happen that we can take advantage of.
Right.
I would love a blowout. How about 35-7?
Well,
Nebraska?
Hey, I'll take that for sure. So last thing we'll talk about here is the college football playoff.
Let's do that.
We haven't talked about it much on our past podcasts, but now we're getting down to the nitty gritty. Right after this weekend, there will be the big show to announce who the 12 teams are. So now we can start looking at potential scenarios there. Right. In terms of this past weekend, in terms of the top ranked teams, nothing too massive. I will say Oregon did move up above Ole Miss by one spot because they beat USC while Ole Miss played a nobody and won, which is totally logical for me. I know Notre Dame has been getting some heat for the fact that they're still in the top 12, considering they haven't played the toughest schedule.
Right, and they have 2 losses.
Right, but those 2 losses were against 2 very good teams at the beginning of the year, and both losses were very close. They lost by like 2 points each time, and they just put up 70 points against Syracuse, right?
Right.
So I think, having this blowout win at this point in their year was helpful for Notre Dame, though they won't get any sort of bump from a conference championship game like some of these other teams will.
Right.
So on the lower end, right, we'll go from the top. We got Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, Oklahoma. Right, so obviously, Georgia's playing against Georgia Tech, Ohio State's playing against Michigan, Oregon's playing against Washington, right? So if any of these teams lose, when they're not expected to, right, obviously that bumps them down the list.
Right.
Then we've got Notre Dame at 9-2, Alabama at 9-2. Obviously, they're playing against Auburn. It is a home game for Auburn, but Auburn's fired their coach.
Right.
They're
a mess.
They're a mess, but they've beaten them in past years where they look like a mess. So that's a little bit like Ohio State and Michigan.
It's true.
Then we've got BYU at 11, Miami at 12, with Utah, who just had the narrow win over Kansas State, just outside at 13.
Right. And you think about that 12-team playoff now, right? So the implications in that area, right, from basically 9 through to 15, 16 are ones that are all in the mix, but things have to go just right for them, and some losses have to happen above them for them to be able to shift in.
Right.
And
like I mentioned, Vanderbilt's playing against Tennessee at Tennessee. So if they won that game,
that might bump them.
That might bump them up a bit.
And there's no group of 6 teams that, usually every year there's some group of 6 team that's done really well, maybe remained undefeated, and so they're higher in the rankings. This year we really don't have that. Our highest ranked one is, I think, below Texas here.
I don't have that one here.
Oh, you don't? It's just the top 18?
Yeah. Okay. But you're right. The top team from the group of 6 will qualify in, right?
Automatically. So that's one of those 12 spots.
So that's one of the 12. So that's a good thing to point out. So we should really be looking at the top 11 here.
Yep.
Because we know that that team will work their way in.
Exactly.
So obviously, like we mentioned, if Michigan, who's currently ranked 15th and is 9-2, if they beat Ohio State,
they're in then.
They would jump into the top 12.
I think they would jump in for sure.
Now, what do you think about Texas, who's 8-3? So they've lost 3 times, but they're at 16. If they beat number 3 ranked Texas A&M, could they somehow weasel their way?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In there,
absolutely, because people would then begin to start scrutinizing when they have to start making a decision about a Michigan team that beat Ohio State or a Texas team that beat Texas A&M, and they're comparing them to a BYU team that's 10-1 in the Big 12. Okay, I'm sorry, when rubber meets the road, those teams are going to find their way above.
Right.
That's just the way that's going to happen.
Yep. So, obviously, next week we'll be back. Hopefully, we'll be talking about Nebraska's win. We'll be talking about, what the updated rankings are, what the conference championship games are, and the implications from that. Because the committee, in our opinion, did a good job last year where they did not punish teams for playing in the conference championship game, right? You don't want it to be a scenario where you want to be the 3rd best team, so you can sit out of your conference championship game. You want to encourage teams to want to play in that conference championship game, so even if you lose, it's not going to be held against you.
Right. But let's use the Michigan scenario. I think if Michigan were to
beat Ohio State,
would Michigan play in the conference championship game?
No,
somebody else.
Well,
because they'd have the head-to-head against Ohio State.
Right. But Michigan has Oregon, 2 losses.
It would end up being Oregon and Indiana, not Michigan. So even if Michigan were to beat Ohio State, Michigan still doesn't have to play in the conference championship game. So that actually would be an easier path for them to get into the 12-team playoff. Now, they don't have a chance to win the Big Ten championship.
Right.
But they have a better chance of getting into the playoff.
Because Michigan lost to USC
and Oklahoma.
So that's a non-conference loss.
Right.
So that doesn't count against them.
Right. So they would both have one loss in conference. But Ohio State, because of the head-to-head, Michigan would be above Ohio State. But Oregon would be above.
Because they only have one loss overall.
Correct.
So presuming that they win this weekend, then they would be in above Michigan.
So that's a scenario. Those are all the scenarios with this, with this 12-team playoff that now come into play, where you've got all these teams that still get into the playoff, even though they don't have to play in the conference championship game. Alabama is going to end up playing in the SEC, assuming they win the Auburn, the Iron Bowl. But Georgia...
That's not true, though. Remember, we looked at that before. So right now in the SEC, Texas A&M is at the top because they're undefeated.
And then Georgia.
Right, and then Georgia's below them, and then Ole Miss. Who's 10-1 right now.
Okay, there you go.
Whereas Alabama, they're 6-1 in the conference. Alabama's 6-1 in the conference.
Okay.
But once again, Alabama has a non-conference loss.
Right. So but they're going to be in the playoff.
Most likely.
Yeah.
But that's Alabama is tricky, right? Like obviously if they lose to Auburn,
Ole Miss.
If Alabama loses to Auburn, they're definitely out.
Well, right.
Presuming that they beat Auburn, then they're probably out of the SEC championship game, and so then they're relying on nothing crazy happening for some team to jump above them, from below.
Correct.
That would be the scenario they would want to avoid.
Yep, exactly. So those are some of the interesting things that happen now with this 12-team scenario.
Yep. So we'll be coming back to you next week to talk about the what the conference championship game matchups are and the implications for the playoff.
And a bowl game.
Speculation, about the bowl games and where Nebraska might end up. We both predicted preseason 8-4, right? And we were being optimistic when we said that. So that is still within reach here for our regular season.
It would be great. I mean, this is a season-defining game for Nebraska. I don't know that it is for Iowa. I mean, Iowa's going to be disappointed with an 8-4 season relative to their recent years and such. But overall, 8-4 overall. But Nebraska, if we end up 8-4, we can look back and be very irritated by the Penn State game and the Minnesota game, and maybe even the SC game, because frankly we should have won that one. But overall, when you just take a step back, if we end up at 8-4 after Friday afternoon, I'm happy camper.
Yep.
I have to be a happy camper as a Nebraska. That means we've moved forward, and hope that Matt Rule and his staff have learned some really important lessons about playing football in the Big Ten.
Agreed, totally. So thank you out there for listening to this episode. You can email us at collegefootballthrowdown@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or on YouTube. We're College Football Throwdown. You can leave us a rating or review there. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. So thank you out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.